So I got to start with you, Corey, because if there was one main storyline coming out of all this Trump stuff, it was you. In your comments on a panel after those auto tariffs, you and of course you have worked on the 2015 campaign. You managed Doug Ford's campaigns a bunch of times. You talked about the current trajectory for the federal conservatives, and you said if they don't get on it and get on it quick, talking about Trump, they are going to get obliterated. Like I said, that drove the news cycle. Do you still think that's the case? I wish I could know what you're saying, but you might be on mute. Hold on one second. Let's see. There you go. You're back.
Can you hear me?
We missed you say, no, I changed my mind completely. No,
yes, right. Now, let's make some more news. Yes, I completely disagree with everything I said last week. No, I don't think it's an opinion. I just think it's a fact, based on all of the polling that I've seen and, all of the polling that's publicly available. Look, there isn't a 35-point shift in voter intent because everything's going well. It's good for your campaign, or everything has stayed the same. There's been a massive shift in voter intent in this election, the likes of which I don't think has ever been seen before in Canadian politics. And that's because of Donald Trump. It's just like that is the thing that has changed. The Conservatives were running, I think, one of the best pre-writ campaigns ever seen in the country prior to this, when the issue set was in alignment with what they were talking about. And that issue set was affordability, it was interest rates, it was a carbon tax, it was the unpopularity of Justin Trudeau. And being in sync with the electorate on those issues drove them to sort of untold heights. And then being out of sync with voters with respect to Trump has basically pulled the house of cards, caused it to fall apart on them. And so I don't know what advice could be more obvious than that which I gave last week, which is you got to get on the big topic that everybody's talking about, that everybody is thinking about, and that everybody is voting on. And I say that also as somebody who just ran a campaign in this environment for a conservative leader that was victorious. And that's how we did it. So I don't know. I think it's fairly obvious advice. I hope they take it. Look, I'm a conservative. I want them to win, despite what you might have read from some people on X. But I don't think they're going to win unless they start following some of that advice, whether it's from me or whether it's from somebody else. But I think the advice is pretty consistent.
So Scott, is this a sort of political spectrum thing, or is it government versus not in government? And I say that because you could see just through the Doug Ford example, and then again this week through what happened and Mark Carney's ability to act as prime minister because he holds that position, the considerable advantage they had on the issue because they hold those positions during a campaign. Is it about that, or is it about something more in your view?
I think it's about something more. I think it's about something more fundamental in the nature of the parties, the campaigns, and the people that are directing them. I do want to start by saying that I have officially tendered my resignation as Corey's food taster. I no longer want that job. I no longer believe that's a safe job to have. But, I'm forced objectively to agree with Corey. And that's because I really, truly believe this one thing in my bones, and I may be proven wrong, but I believe it absolutely on this day, at this point in this campaign, and that is on April 28th, the person that Canadians believe is best equipped to take on Trump, tariffs, trade, and all of the chaos that involves will be the person that Canadians overwhelmingly select as prime minister. I just believe that is the inevitable test that will be applied. There is a contrary case, and there's plenty of reason for Liberals not to expect that the Conservatives are in the process of self-immolation, and that there's a whole series of things. The Liberal campaign needs to tighten up in Quebec. Mr. Carney has had a couple of shaky moments there. The reality is that we're going to have another week dominated by trade, but then we don't know where this goes, and there is a level of unpredictability. And people start to feel the pain. Perhaps those who are in office now, which is to say Mr. Carney, might become the subject and object of some of that. And by the way, before we get ahead of ourselves, many, many, many polls do indicate that this thing is virtually tied in terms of public opinion, and that there is a deadlock between cost of living and pocketbook issues and Trump as the leading issue. The challenge for the Conservatives is that all of the momentum is behind Trump as the ballot question, and we know that tariffs are coming on Wednesday, and we know that there's further signs of chaos, and we know that Donald Trump has never once in his life as president gone fishing for 3 weeks. So he will burst into this campaign again.
Yeah, Kathleen, there is, to Scott's point, some interesting polling out that does show that there's still an appetite for change and that there's still a lot of concern around the cost of living. It depends on the poll, but sometimes it's the same as Trump, less than Trump, or just above. But they're very competitive as issue sets. The difference, just jumping off what everybody is talking about, is also around a narrative, right? And the narrative that built out of Corey's comments was chaos on the Conservative campaign. We reached out to the campaign manager, or sorry, the media team there to see, is there, because now there's lots of speculation that something could happen, for example, to the campaign manager, Jenny Byrne. We reached out asking, does Pierre Poilievre have full confidence in Jenny Byrne as campaign manager? And we got a response very succinctly, said yes. You've been on many campaigns before. Once that kind of a narrative emerges, and I know that many will dismiss it as sort of driven by the pundit class, by the media, but what do you do about it?
Well, I think the biggest challenge that the Conservative campaign faces this week is the fact that they've been criticized, rightfully, in my opinion, of not being able to be nimble, to react, to change strategy. Basically, there's a lot of campaign managers out there across the country, Conservative campaign managers, that are hoping that they could rerun the campaign from 2023 or 2024, which clearly they won, right? But campaign managers, set out with their strategy, and it's kind of like a flight path. They're gonna follow this path. But if there's turbulence, which Trump is proving again and again to be on Canada, providing all these like side punches and whatnot, they've got to change. And we saw 2 campaigns this week change, right? We saw Carney pivot, move to his prime ministerial role, make some statements about what he would do confronting tariffs. Even Jagmeet Singh, who many have considered down and out, changed his campaign this week, moved to Windsor to be with the auto workers, to make some clear policy announcements around that issue. What did we see from Pierre Poilievre? He's talking about TFSAs and,
But the TFSAs were extra if you invested in Canada. Today, the capital gains, escaping capital gains, is if you reinvest in Canada. To be fair, there's policy that's out there.
There's policy, but it seems out of sync, right? It seems out of sync when people are afraid of losing their jobs, their own sovereignty even, and saying if you have an extra $5,000 in your jeans, which many people don't, to the point about affordability, to reinvest, it just doesn't, it seemed like he was on the topic that he needed to be. And he seems like he just is so determined to run the campaign that he wanted to in 2023 or 2024 that he refused to realize that, hey, it's March, it's now April almost of 2025.
To Kathleen's point, Corey, Jagmeet Singh did move to Windsor instead of the stop that day that he was going to do. But public opinion polling has yet to bear any fruit for the NDP as well, who keep losing ground to the Liberals. Do you anticipate that there is a quote unquote pivot in store for them that will turn around their fortunes?
For the NDP, pivoting to getting a new leader, but I think they got to wait till after the campaign. I think they're getting crowded out of the conversation in the same way that that we saw in the Ontario election more recently. It's tough for all the opposition leaders to compete in this environment where you have Trump driving the news cycle, and then the response of what the government that's in power, even though they're in a campaign, is doing in response. It takes up a lot of the oxygen, it takes up a lot of the news, it takes up a lot of the relevancy, and I think the Conservatives are better able to compete with that because they are the other main option, and so that kind of gets a little more attention. But for the Bloc and the NDP, I think in that environment it crowds them out, and and it's polarizing on this issue and almost this issue alone. And polarized issues tend to be more of a binary choice than they are a spectrum of options choice.
Okay, I've got about 2 minutes. I want to give 1 minute. I'll give you the response to that just on the NDP, and then I'll go last to Scott.
Democrats do have a challenge, for sure, in this campaign, but what they need to do is actually build a permission structure. New Democrat voters don't want to see Pierre Poilievre win, right? They don't. And they are open and liking, frankly, Mark Carney. So what New Democrats have to do now is saying, it's okay that you like Carney, but you still need us, and here's why. Everything that we value about Canada as a country, healthcare, our pension system, our family allowances, the benefits that people get, things like childcare, they were driven by New Democrats. And so, yeah, it's okay if you like Carney, but come over to us, ensure that there's a balance of power, ensure that there's a healthy number of New Democrats in the next parliament. And when it comes to hyper-local campaigns, what we learned out of the last Ontario campaign is that New Democrats have popular incumbents. So holding on to those incumbents who have worked in those communities for a long time.
All right, Scott, last word to you today.
Well, those are all last straw hopes, to be honest with you. We have to see in the dynamic of this campaign what the NDP could possibly do. Look, the reality is that people are using their vote now more than ever, in this election now more than ever, to pick a prime minister. And that's the challenge, because Donald Trump forces us to think about who the leader will be to navigate through this chaos. And we know that won't be Jagmeet Singh. So the consequence of the election may be that we pick a parliament, but people are using their vote to pick a prime minister. That's the only question on their mind. And that leaves Singh and the NDP deeply, deeply sidelined.